Hello and welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I'm Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and I am super excited to have Kristen Blessman in the room with the Colorado Women's Chamber of Commerce. And gosh, Kristen, this is our fourth interview together. And I joined the Women's Chamber 6-ish months ago, but one of my favorite things I think that I have witnessed so far was the state of women in business.
Yeah, it's a great event.
Oh my gosh. Mind-blowing, really. And you mentioned on the show before that we are 100 years from gender equality.
Yes, over 100.
Over 100 now. And it's hurtful almost to actually know that and wrap my mind around that, because you hear that and you kind of, want off it, but then it ticks, in the middle of the night.
With you and you're like, what?
Yeah. And I totally get it. One of the things, I think my favorite thing that I heard was they asked a question about how many times you've been the only in the room. And I work with a team of all men.
Right.
Yeah. I have one other woman in the entire office here. And if she's gone, I am the only in the building. And I actually love my team, right?
Yeah.
We get along great and we have really good relationships, but it's still a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a problem because when you don't have diverse thought, you don't grow. Right. I mean, there's plenty of research that shows that you're more profitable the more diversity you have at the top. And so that's why it's important. It's not important just because, well, that's awful to be the only woman in the room. It's awful for the company. They're not going to be as successful as they could be. So why wouldn't you?
Exactly. The other piece of shocking information, because as disheartening as it is to be the only woman sometimes, women of color are definitely dismissed a lot more. Yeah. And women with an LGBTQ background. Those are things I think I knew, but not something that really registered until I went to this event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you got some good information out of it, because that's really what it's for. There's so much research out there in this area, right, for women in business, and there are a lot of positives happening. So sometimes we get caught up with, oh, well, especially when something's hard to change, right? So when something's hard to change, if it starts to kind of move the needle a little bit, you say, oh, great. We can, that's done. And we can go look at this. But the whole point of that event is, it's important to celebrate. But when you hear statistics like it's going to take us 107 years to catch up to where men are in the workforce, that's not changed, And in fact, in many instances for women in business, the research is going backwards. So when I first started at the Women's Chamber in 2017, it was going to take women 100 years. The recent research shows 107. So it's getting worse. And so the whole point of that event is to really set the stage and level up for how women are doing in business, specifically in Colorado. Because what we're watching at the Colorado Women's Chamber of Commerce is how can we can't change the whole universe. We can't change the whole nation, but what we can do is look at Colorado as sort of a petri dish and say, okay, let's put Colorado on the map for doing something right for advancing women in business. And then other states will emulate and look at what we're doing and say, oh, they're doing something interesting in Colorado. Let's mirror that or let's mimic that. And then we begin to advocate and change from within. And that's really our goal.
Outside of those facts, because everyone loves to talk statistics, right? And they're fascinating and they really drive the point.
Right.
But the other thing that you guys did was made it a point for action.
Yeah.
Let's do something. Let's not just talk about it and be appalled. Let's go out there and change things.
Yeah.
And so you actually gave us like workbook activities to do.
I know. Yeah.
I loved that.
Yeah. We heard at our last, we've been doing the State of Women in Business for 3 years now. And at our last State of Women in Business, and this will be no surprise to you because you hear this all the time, we had someone from tech speaking about how we needed more women in tech. We had somebody from government speaking to say we need more women in government. And unanimously, the audience told us, we're so sick of hearing that we need women, we want to know how. Well, guess what? No one really knows. And so the idea was that write down what you're going to do, because that's where the how is going to come from.
Exactly. And it's making it a point, right? And so at first I was like, well, I can't do anything. I'm just an employee. How can I change this, right? That was my immediate thought, and I'm sure I wasn't the only one in the room.
Right.
But at the same time, I was like, I can ask.
Yeah.
Right? That's where that starts.
You can say something.
At least start the conversation.
It's really interesting when you think about this. So I'm a woman in business too, and I've been in male-dominated fields in retail. And I've had things said to me and done to me. And looking back, I grew up with 4 brothers, and they weren't really sexist, but I was so used to being around so many men that some of the things that happened to me in the workplace, I didn't think anything of. Looking back on it, I thought, oh my gosh, that was kind of crazy. The interesting thing about it is because I grew up with men, I felt comfortable saying something to men too. I think women often struggle. They're worried, well, oh, I won't get a promotion or I won't get a raise. And so they hold back saying something.
Right.
And I had an instance where a man commented on my skirt or something. And I said, heck, you can't say that. Come on, man. Like, don't say that. And I think that that's one thing that small instance changes behavior.
I agree.
And it doesn't shame, because shaming and pointing people out for being bad and, calling them out, blacklisting, whatever, I don't think that works to create change. I think what creates change are those small movements that we can make for ourselves.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is, I don't know that I'm offending you if you don't let me know that I'm offending you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, albeit there are big things that you can say that are clearly offensive, right?
Yeah, right.
And so stay away from that. But that being said, if I make a joke or snide remark or comment on your skirt, I don't know that I'm being offensive until you let me know that.
And I think that's what makes it hard, right? You look at the Me Too movement, and clearly there are some pretty bad offenders that are on this side of, it's criminal, right? But not every man is like that. And so I think that we need to realize that although that movement's important for calling out things like that, we need to remind ourselves that men are now fearful. They want to do the right thing, most men. So how do we deal with that?
Exactly. Let them speak too. I had a fascinating conversation. We had gentlemen write in questions that they were scared to ask. They were literally scared to ask, right? Like, how do I, if I am saying something offensive, how do I make sure that I'm saying the right words to you?
Right.
And we got a whole bunch of questions. It was a really fascinating conversation, actually. And I was shocked.
Right.
One of the big things that I saw too, because we talk constantly about women in leadership. We need more women in leadership.
Right.
Well, there was one gentleman that had written in and was like, it feels like sometimes there are women that get promoted simply because they're women and they don't have the credentials to have the job that they have, which sometimes is true.
Sometimes that's true with men as well.
Exactly. Sometimes it's not what you know, it's who you know, right? And that's big in the business world in general. Not saying it doesn't happen on the other side.
No, but I think I'm proud of him for calling it out.
Right.
I was at an event once where it was all about getting more women on boards. Yeah. And there was a CEO in the room, who will go unnamed, who said, well, I want to have more women on my board, but truth is none of you are qualified. And I think it was interesting. And of course he got, the laser beams from the women in the room, but I was proud of him for saying it, because what happened as a result of that was a conversation for, in his mind, what prevented women from serving on his board. And we realized it was actually that they weren't CEOs. Yeah. Because he wants his board full of CEOs. And so then that helps us solve the problem, right? Okay, well, there's a pipeline problem. So let's get more women in the CEO role, and then you won't have an excuse anymore.
Right.
And by that person saying, well, that woman's not really qualified, well, let's look into that. Is that really true? Or is she not exuding the confidence that you mostly see coming from men?
Exactly. And there are definitely some other caveats.
But you have to say it.
You have to, because obviously if you're thinking that, you're probably not the only one.
But we're not going to change it if we don't feel comfortable saying it.
Exactly.
So that's really, again, going back to the state of women in business, that's what it's about. It's about getting it out there. Bruce Alexander at Vector Bank, who's one of our winners for Champions of Change, he wasn't afraid to be the man on the stage calling out the conversation, which I was so amazed by.
It was a fantastic conversation. And it's not often that I get to go to a panel where I relate so much to the panelist. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was a great conversation.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you very much for that. And I am excited for 2020s, and hopefully we're going to get this ball rolling and everyone wrote down their to-dos and did them. Mm-hmm. Yes. I know that I made it a point to talk with my HR. So.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. That I got really impassioned after I left.
I'm so glad.
Yes. And that's what it's all about.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk about what we're here to talk about, which is your Champions of Change that you mentioned. That is November 7th.
Right.
Yes.
So I'd love to talk about that. You know, it's not uncommon for business organizations to have sort of a business awards event, right? This business does this or whatever. And when I started at the Women's Chamber, we did a lot of awards ceremonies too, which I'm not opposed to, but it occurred to me that we weren't really learning a lot from them. And really, that's what we're about. We're trying to create change for women in business. And so we really looked at it, and I remember coming from a company, and it was a larger organization, and we were talking about wanting to get them to be a member at the chamber, and they weren't going to do it. And I remember coming back to the office and just being so upset about that. Like, I want to put together a list of companies that aren't supporting women, and, you know, going back to what we talked about, you don't get anywhere from shaming.
Right.
But where you do get real results is by showing good examples of what people do. So I remember talking to our board and saying that. They said, well, maybe that's not such a good idea, but what about a positive list? What about a list showing companies that are doing the right thing so that others can learn from them? And that's really where this came from.
Love that.
And so the idea of Champions of Change is really taking a look at companies that are doing innovative practices in the promotion and advancement of women. We just talked about nobody knows how to change it. There's no collective that says if you do this, 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 and this, you're going to get more women at the top, more women on boards, more women-owned businesses are going to grow. There's no special sauce. There's no recipe. But I think the idea behind this is that when we're getting these companies together and profiling even just the smallest things that they're doing, that other companies in the room will learn and emulate that behavior. And interestingly enough, this year, this is our second year. And so now we're starting a list. Right. So the top champions for change for women. And so with this, they're going to get a badge. They can put it on their website that they are on the list of these Colorado companies that are promoting and advancing women in business, with the idea that if I'm a woman and I have a choice of where I go, and I'm a woman, and guess what? We own 86% of the purchasing power, and I want to support other women. I can look at that business and say, oh, if I go work there, there's going to be a clear path for me to grow. They know how to support women. They know how to make it happen. So I'm going to go choose to work there. If I'm a woman consumer and I see that badge, I'm going to spend my money there.
Yeah.
Because they support women in business.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's such a great idea. But behind that, like, I love this idea of perhaps inspiring other companies to follow suit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And showing them.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they can, look at all of this and see why they're being awarded and kind of pick and choose, what are they doing that we think that we can implement? And the winners, interestingly enough, everybody, we get a lot of flack for this sometimes. Well, of course, that company won because they're really big. They're a corporation. They have diversity and inclusion initiatives, and they can afford those initiatives. That's not true. Our companies are small, medium, and big. And we make sure to have a whole mix. So so whether you have 2 employees or 1,000, it's easy to implement.
Fantastic. Okay. So because some people do get a little miffed when these awards come out and stuff. And I'm going to pick on it here. You said afford initiatives.
Yeah.
There are no initiatives that need to be afforded when it comes to diversity.
No.
Right?
That doesn't have to cost anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just make it a point to be more inclusive in your hiring process.
Right.
And make sure that you have a pathway for everyone.
Yeah. And I think, again, I still am not sure if it's completely bought into in our culture that if you have diversity, you're going to make more money. And I think that that's where, if you really think about it in business, I think that's what you seek to do. There's some businesses like nonprofits that are really in business to be a nonprofit and execute a mission, but they still need to make money to do it. So at the end of the day, that's what we're in business to do. So it just really is a no-brainer. When you think about it, you want more diversity. And so you really have to put your head down and figure out how to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. With diversity, it creates more creativity.
Yeah.
You are attracting more talent.
Right.
Right? Because somebody on your board looks like I do. Somebody on your board sounds like I do. And your consumers are way more turned on by that. Oh, they get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and if you think about it, like the thing that always makes me laugh, and this happened recently, but when you look at brands like J. Crew, for instance, and their entire board was made up of men, yet their customers are women, they're not going to be able to make, just simply because they don't have that perspective, they're not going to be able to make decisions that's in the best interest of their customers without that person sitting at the table. And it was only until recently when they did that. And so I get super sensitive about that because I come from retail, and I was one of only 2 women on an executive team.
Yeah.
And our perspectives were always different.
Right.
And the men would look at us like, what? You're crazy. What are you talking about? And oftentimes that's how it would play out in the business. And they went, oh, I'm starting to see this. Like, that makes sense, right? And so it's so important.
It really is.
Yeah.
So I love that you're celebrating these people that have already got this implemented. So talk to me about your winners.
Yeah. So from like kind of the big corporate side, so DaVita is a winner, and I think it's probably no surprise to individuals that Kent Thierry, the previous CEO, it was a huge initiative of his to try and get more women on their board, more women in leadership, and they're using some really cool, innovative practices in order to do that. But we have some mid-sized companies that are award winners as well. RevGen Partners, which is sort of a small consulting practice locally, they're doing some really cool, innovative practices and looking at leave differently and trying to figure out how to make their employees happy so that they'll stay. We have a small law firm, Griffiths Law, that's winning, and their owner is Suzanne Griffiths, so she's a woman, and she's really kind of looking at, how can I get more women attorneys to step up and stay into the profession and lead. And so she's a trailblazer and amazing. And so that's really what it's about. So they're small and large, and they're all doing really cool things. One of last year's award winners, Pinnacle Assurance, they have great initiatives, right? I mean, that's what they do, but that's not why they won. They won specifically because they are willing to look at individuals as individuals and not sort of all this one, clump of employees that all have to abide by this. And they had a woman who, I think she was diagnosed with cancer, and they embraced her and they gave her everything that she needed to take care of herself while she was going through that, and just said, okay, what do you need in order to stay with us? And I think she was caretaking for another adult at the same time. So it's really just as a business kind of looking at it and saying, okay, what do they need? And it might be different for everyone, and not just assuming, well, this woman's a mother, so she's going to need a leave policy to accommodate her kids, and this woman is this. Like, it's different for everyone. And so they were able to do that as an organization and look at people as individuals and care for them that way.
Oh, I love that. Mm-hmm. That's really exciting. And I like that you've made room here for innovation too, right?
Well, that's what it needs.
Of course it does. Yeah. Let's find unique solutions and something that works differently.
And then, talking about innovation, Bruce Alexander with Vector Bank, he's our winner of the Champion of Change. So companies can win, but then we also choose one individual that's really emulating this. Yeah. And so it might not seem innovative, but him sitting in a room and talking to women in his organization was innovative enough to make change because he was able to listen. Yes. And see things that he had never seen before, right? He went, wow, that's really happening? Wow, I had no idea. And he was willing to go out on a limb and say, all right, well then that's not going to be okay. We're going to change that. We need to listen to that. Let's get to the root of this. Let's have conversations about it. Let's get men in the room to hear it. And so that's not necessarily innovative, but it is trailblazing because not everybody's doing that.
Exactly. It was very cool to hear that he sat everyone down and was like, what's wrong? What's going on? Yeah. Tell me. It takes a strong person to do that. Yeah. To be willing to listen to the negative. Yeah. Yeah. And change from it. Uh-huh. Yes. I love that. So the Champions of Change event is November 7th. And so we're celebrating these winners. Yeah. Yeah.
And the launch of the list.
Yes.
Right. So last year's winners, this year's winners, and it's broken out into categories of why they've won. So there's like Trailblazer of the Year, there's Mission Minded, Colorado Technology Association won that one. Yeah. And so there's different reasons why these companies and individuals are winning. And so it'll be divided by that. But again, ideally, it's to claim the power that women have and say, all right, if I'm going to choose where I'm going to work, I'm going to choose where I invest my dollars as a customer. let's support each other. Because that creates change too, right? That's the whole kind of, social impact movement. I remember when I first started working at Goodwill, there was still the question of whether or not a company's good behavior would drive purchases. Well, that's now, these days, people are like, organizations like Ben & Jerry's and others are using that to market the good that they're doing. So I truly believe that companies can use the good that they're doing to advance women to help their customers feel more aligned with who they are, to get their employees to feel more aligned with they are, because they'll feel supported.
Oh, yeah. Hands down.
Yeah.
Hands down. Gosh, so many great things.
I know.
I want to talk a little bit about the nomination process and how that works. So for next year, more people are making sure that their companies are falling in line. And if they're seeing that, let's nominate them.
Right. And I think the most important thing, it's a really simple, like, one-page nomination. I think the important thing to remember is that when you're nominating a company, it isn't all about stats. So oftentimes it'll be someone in HR writing the nomination, and they're like, well, we have this policy and this leave thing and this da-da-da-da-da. And they leave out the stories of who it impacts. And so that's really what moves the needle, because you can have all those policies and procedures, but then no woman's getting promoted, no woman is being retained, women aren't being advanced, or you're not getting more women on your board. And so it's important to share those stories, even if it's just one woman that you helped create a path for. That's really what moves the needle. And so that's, I would say, kind of unanimously with our organization, it's that human element that we need to know about how it affects women.
Yes. So it doesn't need to be something that's like, okay, we put in an initiative to hire 50% of diversity, right?
It could be something as small as, when you look at Pinnacle, we just helped a woman care for her mother and care for herself when she had cancer. And this is how we did it.
That's huge.
Yeah.
It does. It makes a difference.
It does.
So it's, to be fair, we're looking for something a little more heartwarming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, well, I mean, of course I think this, but I think advancing women in business is heartwarming.
Yes.
Right? The economy grows, families are better off, women are more economically successful and prosperous, so everybody wins. And it's super meaningful.
Yes. Yes, it is. And it's something that I am so excited to be a part of CWCC for.
Yeah.
And it's, as I grow and change in my career and things like that, I am excited to see more and more women being leaders and being, I hope one day that I can be a mentor or an inspiration for another woman.
Well, you will.
Well, thank you.
I
like showing off to my niece. And so I'm like, this is what I do.
But it's true, but people don't want to see change if it's not emotional and it's not passionate, right?
Yes.
That doesn't come from, change doesn't come from something that's, it's kind of boring or whatever. When you see a woman succeed and you think about that, like you showing off to your niece, that is a huge impact, right? I remember at one of our events, we showed a video that was made by Boeing. And were you at that event?
I don't think I was at that one.
So it's called Girls Rising, and the point of the event is to try and to get more women into non-traditional careers. And so we showed this amazing video put together by Boeing, and it was read by women engineers. And the letters that they were reading were declination letters to women applying to engineering school, like 30 years ago. But they were read by women who are engineers today. And it was basically just discouraging them from going into the field. And these women were bawling, thinking about the fact that the women that came before them didn't have the opportunity. The letters were saying, well, we don't really have a way of accrediting a woman, but you can certainly take classes for free if you want to learn about us or whatever, but you're never going to be an engineer. And this was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Nothing.
No. So, that's meaningful. You talking to your niece about your choices that our mothers and grandmothers did not have is really powerful. I mean, that gets me emotional. You know what I mean?
I do. I know exactly what you mean. I told you I am leaving. This is going to be my last podcast. But I'm changing careers and I'm moving over, and I called my mom. And it was a heartfelt moment. And she was like, Alex, I never, ever got to that point in my career until I was in my 50s.
Right.
And it just was, it hit me. and it's not as if my mom wasn't a career woman. She very much was. I used to wear her high heels, right?
Yeah.
I would get in her high heels
Yeah.
and her business skirts. And that's me. That to me was
Right.
an epitome of a woman, right?
Yeah.
And so I to have that phone call with her
Yeah.
and to share that with her was really exciting. And then I got to tell my niece, I'm changing careers.
Yeah.
I'm doing this other thing. And she was like, so you're not going to be on the radio? And I was like, no, honey, but I'm going to have people that I work with and that work under me. And I have a nice position. And she was like, what? That's really cool. Yeah.
Well, and I have to say, it's been inspiring to watch you too, and to be a part of it. Literally, like, I think that that's what keeps me going. When I hear stories like that, I get weepy because you deserve it and you've worked hard, and to hear about your journey is awesome. So I feel so honored to be here, and then to hear the story of your coworkers saying how rewarding it's been for them, who was a man, by the way, how rewarding it's been for him to watch you grow and learn and come a long way is so inspiring. So congratulations to you. It's what it's all about. It's how it's supposed to be.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I so appreciate that. Well, Kristen, one more time, that Champions of Change.
Yes.
Where can people sign up to register?
CWCC.org is our website, and it's right there on the homepage, events and programs. And we're ready to go. We hope you join us. It's going to be super fun.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us today on Connect and Collaborate. You can find more information about Champions of Change, as well as how the state of women in business was, in the description below. So be sure to click on that link. You can find all of the past shows at cobrt.com/radio-podcast. It has been a blast being a host for these last 2 years. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much,
Congratulations.
Kristen. Thank you.